We have Marty Brennaman. Marty, welcome in, sir. It's been a while. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing fine, Justin. Good to see you, pal.
I appreciate you taking time and hanging out with us. So, listen, I know you've been a Reds broadcaster for 46 years. I think it's safe to say you can argue that, hey, I've seen it all and I've experienced it all. I don't think you could say that about this experience that Major League Baseball is going through right now.
No, I don't think anybody has ever experienced anything like this. And, it's the ultimate test of one's patience because you've got to adhere to what the so-called experts say you have to do to minimize the passing along this virus from person to person. And Amanda and I have pretty much been cooped up in the house, and every now and then we'll go to Kroger for groceries or something akin to that. But we've been pretty much adhering to what people tell us, and hopefully we'll be over this very, very soon.
Yeah, you and Amanda, you guys like to travel. You're a very busy couple. You like to be out and about. Are you guys going stir crazy, or are you kind of enjoying this time? I mean, this is what, technically, Marty, this is what real retirement's supposed to be for you.
Well, yeah, to an extreme, I guess you could say that. And we do enjoy traveling. Thank God we went to spring training and we flew to Portland, drove down the Oregon and California coast, and went to a lot of places that I had never been before. And so now the travel, like for everybody else, has come to a complete halt until, it's safe to travel again and we feel safe. So much has been made about opening up things, but the bottom line is how comfortable and how safe people are going to be once they have an opportunity to go to a restaurant or something akin to that. I think it's going to take a while before people are going to feel safe enough to go to the various outdoor and indoor venues that they have been deprived of the last few months until they know that they can do it and do it from a physical standpoint healthily.
We'll get back into how baseball could potentially look in 2020 if there is baseball in 2020. But I want to look back at your last year with the Reds, in your retirement send-off year. You have always said that, you didn't really want the farewell tour, that you were just planning on when your career ended, you were just going to, send in your resignation notice and go off into the sunset. Looking back at how fun and, what an experience that was that last month of your career, are you glad that you did it this way? Do you feel, are you happy that you went out the way you did?
Yeah, I guess so. I think I'd have been comfortable going out the way I planned on going out because I really didn't feel like the ball club or anybody else owed me anything. The 46 years that I spent in this town broadcasting Reds baseball have been so wonderful that that was enough for me. But in looking back, especially the last 3 days, they were very special. And I've thanked Phil Castellini and Karen Forgas and Zach Bonkowski and everybody else in the Reds organization that were instrumental in making the final 3 games of my career at Great American Ballpark special. And I wouldn't give anything for the experience that I went through. But at the same time, I would have been much more comfortable doing it the way I wanted to do it. But that doesn't in any way minimize the appreciation I have for people that made it happen.
My favorite part about that, your final game, of course, getting one of these. I've never actually had a chance to actually listen to a live broadcast at the ballpark. It was a really cool experience, and having for those fans who were able to be in attendance and get one of these, this is a really cool keepsake right here.
Well, the funny thing about that is, Justin, people didn't even know some people didn't even know what that was. I mean, young people had never experienced anything like that before, and honestly, They had no idea initially what the heck that was. So I thought it was a great idea by the ball club, and I think it's certainly a keepsake that a lot of people will take care of down the road. And the great thing about that little radio is it worked very, very well. So I was impressed with that.
Absolutely. Now, we'll kind of transition now into what potentially baseball could look like in 2020. ESPN's Jeff Passan put out an interesting article last week just about different ideas that Major League Baseball is kind of tossing back and forth of what a season would look like if there is a season. I'm sure you've obviously seen that article and have heard what they're, considering potentially, just various ballparks throughout, Arizona, reshuffling some divisions to, the Cactus League and to their spring training divisions. I appreciate that they're efforting to try to find a way to get a season in, but is this the way to do it? What's your takeaway of how it could potentially look if there's a season this year?
Well, to begin with, I echo your initial sentiment. I think it's great that baseball's burning the midnight oil and trying to come up with a feasible plan that will allow them to bring baseball to the forefront in the 2020 year. But it's going to take an ongoing effort to come up with a plan that will be feasible. I mean, I understand it. It's all about the amount of revenue that everybody's losing as a result of what's happened to this economy because of the coronavirus. But at the same time, I would imagine that if they play, that they will be playing in empty facilities. They will not have fans in the ballpark unless they know something from a medical perspective that we have no knowledge of. I think, to me, the neatest plan of all was the one that the most recent plan, or no, not the most recent. The most recent had 3 locations in Florida and Arizona and Texas. I like the ones the Florida teams go to Florida and the Arizona teams go to Arizona. They completely redo the divisions for one season. I like that idea. And at the end of the day, you have a World Series pitting the Grapefruit League winner against the Cactus League winner. I like that. I think they're going to continue to work. It's going to be interesting. And I think one thing that will play into this decision will be when these states start to open things up a bit. And I think probably our state will start to open a bit around the first of the month. We'll see what happens as far as infections are concerned and whether or not the numbers will spike again. I think that will have a large part in making a decision as to whether or not we have baseball in 2020 or not.
You know, part of that, too, is that the players and anyone associated with the team would have to be, secluded for 4.5 months at whatever respective site that they'd be playing in. I mean, you put your broadcasting hat back on if you were still calling games for the Reds. I mean, I don't think that'd be a big deal to you to go somewhere for 4.5 months. But what about like your son, Tom, who has kids, or some broadcasters who have families? Would you be comfortable doing that? Should they be comfortable doing that?
Well, I wouldn't be comfortable at all, even though my kids are all grown. I mean, that means Amanda and I are separated for 4.5 months, and I'm not interested at all in that. To be very, very honest, I told somebody, constantly people come up to me and say, boy, you sure picked the right time to retire. And I put the word unfortunately I did because of the coronavirus pandemic. But I really believe had I come back this year and they had come up with a plan to play ball in Arizona or Florida or the 3 locations or a combination of whatever the plan was that required me to be away for 4.5 months, I would have probably said, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to retire right now rather than go through that. And so it's a tough situation for everybody involved. I know a lot of players have made the comment. They've looked at this situation from a very negative perspective if they're going to be separated from their wives and children for over a third of the year. That's a tough situation to have to deal with.
We have Marty Brennaman with us here on 1410 Wing Live, and we appreciate Marty hanging out with us here a little bit. Marty, it's interesting. One headline that's just been brushed under the rug, that was the main baseball headline heading into the 2020 season, was the handling of the punishment for the Houston Astros and the sign-stealing saga. We already witnessed in spring training how teams were already, kind of showing their feelings regarding their disdain for the Houston Astros. Already a lot of batters being hit, and that was kind of the assumption of what we were going to see a lot of come the 2020 season. So they're probably the only team in baseball that might be a little thrilled that we're not playing games right now. But with that being said, looking back at how that was handled, A.J. Hinch being fired, however, only for a season. We had, the Cora news come out just yesterday or 2 days ago about how that's going to be handled for the Red Sox. Do you believe that they came down with a strong enough fist to handle this punishment, or did there need to be a greater punishment handed down to make an example?
No, I think the commissioner did a terrible job. I think he did a bad job with the Houston situation. I think the way he has handled this Boston thing has been in many respects a contradiction to what he said 2 years ago when he imposed constraints on the Boston Red Sox in that Apple Watch deal, where he said in the future, if we have anything akin to this, that the general manager and the manager will be held accountable. And he turned right around and announcing the Boston situation, and neither the manager or what's his name? Cora had already been fired, but the general manager, there was no penalty imposed upon him at all. I think the thing they overlook here is that Alex Cora was involved. He had to be involved. He was involved in Houston. We know that. He was the architect of what went on down in Houston. He goes to the Boston Red Sox, and nobody can tell me that this was ironic, that the Boston Red Sox happened to be the second team involved. And the only thing consistent between those two teams from a personnel perspective was Alex Cora. So I'm stunned that they're going to let Alex Cora come back and manage in 2021. I just think the commissioner has done a bad job in handling this whole situation. I think it's going to be his legacy when the time comes that he steps down as commissioner. The way I think he mishandled this whole situation.
Yeah, Rob Manfred's has tried to be as hands-on with the sport as possible. I mean, a lot of changes that he has tried to implement, the 3-batter minimum. I mean, these are some of the smaller changes that he's tried to implement. But with that being said, when you look at the 3-batter minimum, when you look at, the pitch clocks and, the expanded playoffs, are these issues that he's trying to fix? Are these real issues with baseball that even need to be addressed? Or are these the types of things he's trying to do as like a legacy movement so he can always be known as the guy that made these changes in the sport?
Let me tell you something, Justin. No one is more traditional about this game than I am. But I can tell you right now that a lot of the things that the commissioner wants to incorporate into this game, I'm with 100%. People are tired of watching 3.5-hour, 9-inning baseball games. They are sick to death of that. I know you got naysayers that say, oh, no, that's one of the great things about the game of baseball. There's no clock. That might have been true 20 or 25 years ago. I don't think it's true today. So I think his efforts to try and figure out a way to speed up the game is very, very important to the future of this game and its success. Now, some of the things he's talked about are radical. I don't have a problem with a 3-batter minimum. I have absolutely no problem. When I see managers go to the mound after every hitter in one inning, I think that's ridiculous, and something has to be done to minimize or stop that. Some of the other things he's talked about are quite radical, but I still maintain that the biggest problem this game has, other than trying to get the youth of our country back involved in the game as it was when I was a kid, is the fact that they're not fans of going out and regularly watching 3+ hour baseball games. That's a reason why they got rid of doubleheaders, scheduled doubleheaders, because they did polls and the polls came back almost the same, that people did not want to sit through 6 or 7 hours of baseball watching 2 games anymore.
I know this would go against traditionalist mindsets as well, but one change I would love to see, and I know it'll never happen, I do believe it's an issue that, like Mike Trout, you'll maybe see him, statistically right now on pace to be one of the best baseball players of all time. But you only will have a chance to see him at Great American Ballpark, possibly 2 more series for the rest of his career. You think of the NBA, LeBron James in the Western Conference, he'll still come and play in every Eastern Conference arena every single season. Your stars throughout the NBA are visibly seen in every arena in some capacity. Do you believe baseball, that impacts them as well, where Mike Trout and the stars of baseball are not easily viewable at ballparks across Major League Baseball?
Yeah, I do, but I don't know how you can rectify that, because you're singling out one team. You're singling out the Los Angeles Angels, and that's because Mike Trout plays on that team. But then you've got to talk about some of the other players that National League fans don't get a chance to see, or American League teams don't get a chance to see certain National League players. I don't know how you can remedy that situation. I know people have said before, you can take Mike Trout and walk him down the streets of Manhattan and New York, and very few people would recognize him. And that's probably true, as opposed to a basketball player and not so much in a football player sense, because those guys are coming up all the time. That's a tough situation to try and figure out if you're going to allow the real superstars of the game to appear in every ballpark every season. You're going to have to radically change a whole lot of things in order for that to happen.
All right, Marty Brennaman, last 2 things here. We'll let you go. We appreciate you spending your lunchtime with us. Someone just messaged, is that a robe? Someone wanted to know if you're wearing a robe. Is that a retirement robe?
No, it's not a robe. It's a pullover. It's a robe. I get up every day and shave and shower and get dressed. This just happens to be a half-zip pullover.
There we go. Hey, last night, the NFL draft, Joe Burrow. I mean, the city of Cincinnati, I mean, the buzz in Cincinnati is really high right now. You look at how busy the Reds were this past offseason. I mean, I love all the changes that they've made. The Reds and the Bengals both, after dealing with losing seasons for so long, have officially gone all in. It's a great time to be a Cincinnati pro sports fan right now.
Yeah, it is. I think the buzz over Joe Burrow is sensational. It's really special because of the fact that he's from the state of Ohio. He's from Athens. His dad was a celebrated high school football coach. This kid obviously is very, very special. But I really, truly believe, Justin, that not the fact that they would not have drafted Joe Burrow. I think they had no choice, to be honest with you. Even if their desires in the darkest hour of the night was to Chase Young or somebody like that, they had to take Joe Burrow for a lot of different reasons. But I really believe that the money that they've spent so far, aside from drafting Joe Burrow, was all spurred on by the fact that the Castellini ownership with the Reds went out and got Mike Moustakas and Nick Castellanos and Wade Miley. I don't believe for 1 second that the Bengals would have gone to the point that they went, to the excesses that they went to monetarily before they even drafted Joe Burrow, had the Reds not done what they did this past offseason.
Interesting note last night, Trevor Bauer tweeted at, Joe Burrow saying, welcome to the city. It's looking forward to competing for championships the next couple of years. Maybe that's a sign right there that Trevor Bauer is interested in staying in Cincinnati. He's quite the vocal one, by the way. He's not a fan of broadcasters criticizing the team. I don't know if that was at you or what that was, but Trevor Bauer.
Let me make a point about that. When he made the comment, I guess it was some sort of Q&A where somebody asked him what the biggest problem was in the game of baseball today, and his answer was the broadcasters. And my response was, well, nobody knows better than Trevor Bauer, because every time he started a game, he was in the clubhouse by the third or fourth inning. So he had a better chance at listening to me or listening to anybody else. I think it was kind of weak that if he was going to say broadcasters, be more specific than he was. But believe me, he got a chance to listen to a lot of me last year because he got his ass handed to him every time he went to the mound. I think he's going to be, and I said this last year, I think if we play this season or if we don't play this season, we'll have to look to 2021. And I feel the same way you did about that tweet. That was encouraging for me because I felt like maybe that meant that he had plans to come back and be with his club in 2021. I think he'll have a big year. I know the transition was tough for him, obviously, going from Cleveland to Cincinnati. This guy's too good a pitcher to suffer through the same type of indignities that he suffered after he became a Reds player last season.
All right, Marty, we'll send you off with this. I had a chance about a year or two ago when you spoke at the PAC Center in Van Wert, Ohio. We had a dinner with you guys. By the way, I couldn't wait. I had dinner with you guys a few years ago, and in Van Wert, Ohio, there's only two places that you'll run into everyone you know. It's Walmart and the Mexican restaurant. So I can't wait. I'm going to walk into the Mexican restaurant. I'm going to look like a badass. I'm sitting and having dinner with Marty Brennaman. I open the door. There's not one person there, not one single person.
That was a nice night. Night. It really was.
I'm going to have you share one story on the way out the door. You shared a couple of stories about some of the pranks that you and Joe Nuxall used to play on one another. If there's an appropriate one that you could send us off with, could you do that?
Well, I mean, the one he did on me after I had done countless pranks on him because he was so easy. A guy, after a while, it wasn't fun anymore because I could get him anytime I wanted to. But the time that I got called on the carpet after an article showed up in Sports Illustrated about Joe pitching batting practice and Joe being a batting practice pitcher, and Sports Illustrated sent a young lady to cover us for a weekend at Shea Stadium, and I would read in the innings in which Joe did his play-by-play, the third, fourth, and seventh. I'd read a book, which I do all the time anyway, and when she wrote the piece, she mentioned in the article that when Joe does a play-by-play, Marty gets out a bestseller and reads it. And I knew I was in trouble when I showed up in Sports Illustrated. So I got a call from Dick Wagner's secretary. Dick was the general manager of the club and said, Mr. Wagner wants to see you. And I went in that day and he said, you seen this? I said, yes, sir, I have. He said, let me give you a piece of advice. This better not ever happen again. He said, it's very unprofessional. And so 3 weeks later, we were we're playing a series in Montreal against the Expos, and I did the first 2 innings and brought Joe on in the third. I said the Reds are leading the Expos 3-1, and now with the play-by-play, here's Joe. And Joe said, "Thank you, Marty." And he paused. He said, "Boy, that looks like a good book you're reading." I was not reading a book. I would no way have I taken a book out of my briefcase in light of my problem with Dick Wagner. But Joe got me. I really thought that went over the air when in reality he had told the engineers with 20 seconds to go in the commercial, turn all the microphones off, the crowd mic and the play-by-play mic and his mic. So that's the one time that Joe got me. Now, the times I've gotten him probably would be best served sitting in a bar and telling amongst a bunch of guys. But he got me good. That's the only time he got me, but he made it worthwhile.
All right. Well, good stuff. Marty Brennaman, Hall of Famer, good enough to join us. Marty, there's a lot of disappointing things about not having baseball this year. One is not being able to see you get inducted into the Reds Hall of Fame, but there's so many good and fun things coming when baseball resumes, and that's one of many. I'm excited for the season. Hopefully we have a season here, but if not, the most important thing is everyone being safe and healthy, and that includes you and Amanda.
Well, we hope so. Thanks very much, Justin. Stay well, pal.
Will do. Take care. All right, and there he is, Marty Brennaman, the Hall of Famer, good enough to join us here on today's 1410 Wing Live. You can access these on our Facebook page, on my Twitter handle, which is at 1410Kenner, or at wingam.com. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It's been a lot of fun. Until next week, this has been 1410 Wing Live.